Let's jump right into it, shall we? So Chris asked me to talk 50,000 foot level, if you will, to introduction to forest management. So what we're going to do today is three things. We're going to look and hopefully raise the awareness of importance of Midwest woodlands. I kind of threw us all in there, Indiana and Illinois and us over here in Missouri and folks up in Iowa, and demystify some of the concepts of woodland management and really kind of set the stage for both the other presenters today, as well as your opportunity to see things firsthand in the field. And last but not least is connecting you with available resources. We're going to focus on the folks in Illinois, but if we got anybody outstate, similar type of websites and resources that you'll have. So really, Midwest forests and woodlands, they're important. This is a screenshot from what the Forest Service has working individual tree species parameter maps. I'm going to throw up right there. There is the link. There's, if you scan that code, it'll take you to this website. And it's kind of self-explanatory, but it's really kind of cool. And I'm sure Chris could give you some pointers on it. But what I called up, what I did here was, this is the forest cover. We live in the oak hickory forest type. And so this is the major red oaks and white oaks and all the hickories I threw in there. And you can see, so the brighter the color, the more that we have, and you can just see how we're located, primarily there in southern Illinois. But then you can see going up the Illinois River there quite a bit. And so just as a good point to just kind of set the context of what we're talking about here. And when we talk about forest management, we are really kind of referring to the oaks and hickories. That's our dominant trees that we have in the main, if you will, canopy, or the tops of our forests and woodlands. So they're important, like we say, because they're home to countless game and non-game species. We always think the deer and the turkey, but also we have wood ducks out there, and here in southern Missouri, yep, we're getting quite a population of black bear. But one thing about the oaks in particular, they support over 500 species of Lepidoptera, so our moths and our butterflies. And so that's one piece, but it's the larvae that really they feast on. And they really set up the foundation for the whole ecological system that we have in our oak hickory type. I mean, we have things like the oak beauty moth. I kind of think that's kind of cool because you see that image there on the right. That's not a stick, that's the larva. And so they can, those are our inchworms, and they can mimic the ones that are out here in the fall. They mimic a dead a twig. So that's one of their defense mechanisms. But, so you might see different avian species pecking away at your woods in January, and you go, well, what are they after? Well, they're after these guys here, these dormant larvae. So they provide food for, our species throughout the year. It's not just when we see the critters out there. This is a cool one I like, the greater dagger moth. I don't know much about him. I'm a forester, but I thought when I was kind of going through this, it was quite interesting to find him. But we have the Polyphemus moth, and their cocoons that they have, those are like filet mignon to owls and bats in particular. So they really kind of, again, aid to the diet. But it's not just the living matter. There's a litter moth that's actually out there, consuming, doing their thing in the dead litter. So all of these folks are providing the base for, what we have here. Oh, wanted to throw in this too. So we said 500 species on the oaks, but compares that to some of our other hardwoods that we have out there. Dogwood, they support about 126 different species, all the way down to spicebush, about 14. So collectively, they add quite a bit, but the dominant player is our oaks. And again, these moths and larvae, they're important to a whole host of insectivores, from red-eyed vireos, cardinals, magnolia warblers, cerulean, I can never pronounce that word, warblers, the golden crown kinglets. That's the one that I saw on my woods and my oaks, pecking at those larvae in January of all times. So also providing clean water and control, flood control. This is an image of the Mark Twain Dam up in northeast Missouri. And this particular reservoir is the drinking water for 17 different regional water districts that feed off this lake. And then this provides flood control of Salt River, which then flows into the Mississippi, not too far above where the Illinois comes in. And we really can't forget about the billions of dollars the state's economy and what they do to stabilize rural economies. This here is McGinnis Wood Products, and work with them quite a bit. They support over 150 direct jobs in their facility. But then when you start counting the loggers and all the support industry for both the mill and the harvesting community, over 500 indirect jobs. And that's just in one small place. So we can paint that same picture in all of the states where our presenters are today. Now let's move in. It's important, right? But we have woodland threats. And while we don't have usually catastrophic wildfires, they can happen here in the Midwest. This one here is what we call a stand replacement fire. You see it's toasted. This was a result in 2012. This is in the heart of the Ozarks. And we had that really bad drought in the spring and then the summer and then the flash drought with those high temperatures. And it didn't take much to consume all of the available fuel that was out there. So wildfire can happen. Then we had the derecho of 2009, May 8th. So there's the picture that on the left shows where all the damage path was. The lower right, just massive amounts of timber were laid down. And that graphic there, that is centered right over that's a radar image. So it really wasn't, it was more like a hurricane, a land hurricane than a derecho. You can see that counterclockwise flow there where we had researchers down there in the Sinkin Experimental Forest. And they were out there firsthand, and they said that, the winds came out of the southeast or southwest rather, and then it was dead calm, and then it dropped and came out of the northwest. So it was quite an event that we had, and it even touched over there. I think it finally played itself out there in the Carbondale area. And then we got to say something about invasives. we've got everything, bush honeysuckle. I usually get calls around May saying my trees are dead. And it's mainly because they're thinking, well, Easter time, the bush honeysuckles woke up with the forsythias, but everything else is still asleep. And then calorie pear, we're seeing more and more of that, not just in our urban wildland interface, but just throughout the woods. I've been in some places where you'll be going down and think it's a sarvisberry in bloom, and then you see that pyramidal shape and you go, no, it's something else. And it turns out to be this. And we're seeing other ones in the southern parts of our range there in Illinois, Missouri. I'm sure probably Lenny over in Indiana, they're probably seeing now things like, tree of heaven. So there's just constant threats out there that we're seeing bringing in. But bush honeysuckle is really one that will be interesting when you go out and learn about some of the management. Some of the things we talk about is managing light and harvesting and things of that nature. Well, you got to be careful that you don't have these critters out there first, because all you're going to do is really wake them up as well. So it's created some nuances in forest management that we didn't have, at least when I was starting my career. But then we have other ones. We have oak wilt, where you might have a pocket of dead and dying trees radiating out like you see there on the left. We've got another one we affectionately call in the forestry circles RWOM, which is rapid white oak mortality. And you can see that's more ephemeral. It's not widespread, but it's something we're keeping our eyes on. It kind of pops up. And you can see it kind of follows this one here, follows the drainages, right? It's kind of looking down in a creek watershed series there in the upper Merrimack, southwest of St. Louis. But we do have, our threats there. Now, the level of private ownership is significant. Whether or not you look at Indiana, Illinois, us over here, it's even up in Iowa, about 82% is privately owned of our woodlands. 18% is, whether it's state or federal or urbanization or something of that nature. But it is significant that you all hold the key to a lot of the successes or failures that we'll have here in our part of the country. So what are your options? Well, you can do, some folks will manage for timber, others will manage for non-timber products, right? You also can manage for wildlife, and you'll see a little touch on it today or in my presentation, but you heard from Adam. In that case, in some, depending upon the species, you can have your cake and eat it too when it comes to doing things for wildlife and doing things for timber. Manage for recreation. A lot of those private landowners like you all, they're what we call the recreational forest landowners. They're not in it for necessarily timber, or might not even for wildlife. They're looking at it just as a source of recreation, getting out of the city. The ethics piece is very important too, and it kind of integrates with all this, managing just for wanting to have healthy forests and clean water. Leaving a legacy, kind of tied in with the recreational part, maybe. I mean, how folks have come into the purchase of their land or the right of their land, but leaving something for future generations. And it can be a combination of all that. I mean, it's not a one or type thing, and that's usually what I've seen over here. We'll see at least two, if not three, in some cases, all of those wrapped into what a particular landowner feels their options might be. And one last one is benign neglect. It's kind of the brethren over in Kentucky, they kind of coined that, I think, use it, but I think it does sum up quite nicely, and we'll get into that right now. And so, can you do that? Can you just practice what we call, or what I'm calling, benign neglect, right? You look at this picture here and you go, hey, if it's green, it's good, right? I mean, that looks healthy. I mean, I don't see nothing dying out there really, but it's risky. Yeah, your woodlands are going to continue to grow, right? But they're going to become more vulnerable to invasive plants. You can get timber theft if you got high quality woods out there, hardwoods, whether it's a walnut. White oak is really is a hot species, it seems like, here in Missouri right now, for stave, for the trees that go into the manufacturing of wine and spirit barrels. But who knows what else really when you if it's just leave it alone, because I'll use the phrase here in a minute, the unweeded garden, if you will. We've got the unweeded woodland garden. And then when you might have goals, but if you're just doing nothing, then some of those goals are probably going to be harder to achieve if you just think Mother Nature is on the same page as what you want to do. So, and again, kind of the flip side of that, then why actively manage your woods? Like this is a landowner I've got over in Bollinger County, just west of Cape Girardeau area. That it's things like, you're managing it again to efficiently achieve what your goals are, what you want to do, making things, whatever those things are, better, leaving a legacy, leaving things better than what you found them, to ensure the sustainability of your woodlands and all those benefits that they're going to provide. Maybe not in addition to the ones that you're targeting. There's usually a lot of the, if you will, the fringe benefits that can kind of come along with that. And you'll get technical and financial assistance. There is available out there for implementing these improved conservation practices. So those are my four top ones, if you will, for why I try to encourage landowners to start the process. So, it's really kind of like, where do you want to take your property? It's like a roadmap. If I wanted to get down and see Chris, yeah, I've got a prime way I can go. I might have some different alternatives, but really start and you ask yourself, really, where do you want to go? What's your vision? And this is good. I was telling Chris before we started, the old adage, failing to plan is planning to fail. This was the theme just yesterday morning along I-70 west of Columbia here. They're built the new bridge, and now they're needing to take and replace the eastbound bridges, but they had to blow up the first one, right? Take it down. So I-70 was shut down for 4 hours yesterday morning from about 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And if you were planning to go to Kansas City and you hadn't heard that or made plans otherwise, I got a feeling you were probably not a happy camper. So how do you determine the best route to get there? And like we say, first thing is when you're working with a natural resource professional, whether it's a wildlife biologist or a forester, the first things first is really kind of that initial visit is to sit down and just talk, just for you to share your vision. And I used to be, we'd say goals and objectives. And that sounds like, wow, you really know what's going on. And you might, but really it's kind of, let's back it up and really, where do you want to go? Just what's your vision? What's it going to look like 5, 10, 15 years down the road? And sit down with them, maybe take a walk in the woods. If you've got, I've done that where I've spent an hour, I spent 4 hours, but just letting the landowner tell me the story, because then that kind of helps guide me. It used to be like that, Rick, my friend there, and us were the old graybeards, but we were probably taught initially, we're the professionals, we know what's best, and we didn't do a very good job of listening to you. And so that's, I'm proud to say, even the old dogs can learn new tricks, but all the natural resource professionals these days, we get it. We've got to listen to you, because we learned the science of management. Now we learn the art by every canvas is different. Every landowner, it's a new canvas. So, and really kind of in that conversation, what kind of land do you have? Do you have a prairie? I'm fortunate here with Illinois. I mean, in like Missouri, we've got, the expanse of everything from prairies to savannas that were over in the northwest part of our state, northern Illinois, open woodlands, so get a few more trees, start getting closed woodlands, and then finally down in the current river hills on southeast Missouri, where it's really mountainous, that's where you would tend to get your closed forest. But all of these are landscapes that kind of set the broad parameter, but you can have that kind of conversation with your forester. Then that forester, having sat down with you and looked at it, they're going to go out and they're going to do an inventory. We don't measure every tree. We take sample plots, but they're going to measure things and collect information on your property. They're going to measure things like tree diameter and determine the height of the tree. They're going to set up things, what we call stands. So, the old adage is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So we're going to take your property and divide it up into smaller pieces that are more manageable, where they have the same species, the same aspect, whether we're talking a north-facing slope or a west-facing slope, those kind of things. Kind of break it up, and the forester then is putting this information together. And what they're going to do then is they're going to develop a plan. They're going to sit down, but the first thing they'll come out, this is one of our consulting foresters, all that, there's a lot of words in there, right? But and they'll collect a lot of information, and they'll even, maybe some will have a graphic there where they'll have a by diameter distribution, so small to large in that graph, and the number of trees. And this forester here, he's even done a stacked bar where you can see here in the case, that white one at the bottom, those are white oaks. This is a really good stand. He's got this property owner had a lot of white oaks in there, and that's what they're wanting to manage for. And so, but it can tell kind of the story. And then the forester will take all this, they'll have information like this on every stand, and come back and sit down with you, because they'll sit there and if I've got a landowner that wants to grow walnut trees and their land can't support walnut, then that's another issue. But we sit down and we give you the information of what your land's capable of supporting and where's to put, invest your hard-earned dollars and resources. And then they'll just actually then come back, and here's, like I say, what they'll have. Property, this is our farm, one of our experimental farms in the Ozarks, but take that elephant, break it up into small bite-sized chunks, and then Are you going to look at just doing brush management in this case? Or are you going to actually harvest some trees? Or are you going to do no management, have some areas where that's off the limits, or just whatever those pieces are. But it's a process, and usually, it can be a 2 or a 3 or, even sometimes 4 times a visit. But there's usually a few steps along the way in keeping you engaged throughout the whole time. Access is important. I threw out some pictures here. This is really problematic. One, we've got to get access to your property. So in that upper left there, narrow gates, something, a lot of old farm gates might be 10 or 12 feet. And if you do have a wildfire, or you do need forestry equipment to come in, they might not be so generous, and they might, one, if they can get in that way, or if they can, I got a feeling the gate's going to be down because you'll really want your property saved. Or if you have an elaborate gate with codes on it or something like that, that's can be problematic. I really like that one in the bottom, though, because this was on one landowner that they actually had harvestable material on the other side of that bridge that only supports 4 tons. I think logging trucks and equipment, just a tad more than that. So these are the things you kind of, access to the property is one thing. And then also looking at it as, once you're on the property, what do you have? What kind of woods, roads, or trails? Now that one there on the left, that's pretty nice. I mean, it's got gravel and it's got a little swale kind of cut out where it's coming down from the uphill side. The utility poles, the electric going down to that person's cabin there is nice and high. That's kind of like the Cadillac version, but it doesn't have to be like that. You might just have a woods road there coming up where you can get your vehicle up, or it might just be an old abandoned harvesting trail, skid trail. All of those pieces, they can serve multiple purposes, not only for reentry into your property, probably they pick the best route, but things like recreational trails that can be done, fire breaks can be used for that. So kind of keeping in mind where, or if you've got streams you need to cross, whether they're perennial or intermittent, those kind of things all kind of factor in. So, and depending upon what kind of equipment, if you do have a harvesting that needs to be done, some loggers can't get in with their equipment, some can. So it's just, again, access is fairly important, both onto your property and once you're on there. Now, this is everything in forestry, one slide. Chris and Adam, or Chris can tear it apart. Lenny can kind of tear it apart as you go through, but I just kind of want to show you, so kind of the life of the forest, from large trees, to harvest and regenerating the forest. And then as it goes up from seedlings and sprouts to saplings and poles, then that's smaller saw timber. And then finally the large, just, most of our oak hickory forests, when we're managing, we're talking in about that 80 to 100 year cycle. But there's different ones you can have, whether we're looking at what we call here the regeneration practices, and we'll just touch upon them briefly here. Then we've got things like establishment practices. We might have some things that we need to do to make sure that we've got the next generation coming on. And then that interim piece, while the trees are growing up, sapling and pole size, what we tend to call over here tending practices. So an unmanaged wood can look something like this, where, management in forestry is really all about, key is light management. That's our key resource. There are other limiting factors, but light is it. So you're at the top of the canopy, if you will, your woodlands, full sunlight, no problem. As you go down into the forest canopy to that moderate shade, and then finally deep shade, where then you'll have small and low vigor, what we call that advanced regeneration, what the next forest is going to look like. And so what goes on there, that's the key, particularly in oaks, both white oaks and red oaks, is we've got that cohort down there we might have. So last year over here in Missouri, we had a bumper crop of white oak. We just, up until, it's very periodic anyway, but we hadn't seen an acorn crop in several years. And last year, it was like walking on marbles in the forest. And so you can get those seedlings established. Saw that when I was at the scout camp and I was teaching the forestry merit badge. lots of little babies. Just you could actually just gently dig through the litter and you'd still see the acorn attached. But those guys, oaks in particular, they're root builders. They spend all their time getting themselves established. And that's great. But if we don't do something in the first 10 years of the life of those little seedlings, they usually go out, and you'll ultimately lose that cohort. Or if we have some things where a deer maybe nipped off one and the oak can resprout. And again, those might be too small, they'll hang in there. But eventually, if we don't get light to that forest floor, we lose them. So what we tend to do, things we'll do is like a shelterwood management. That's one that will kind of bring the forest along, where we'll get rid of that mid-story. Chris's neck of the woods down there, you know, you'll be over here in the river hills, we'll have a sugar maple. In the Ozarks, we tend to have red maple, but we'll also get things like ironwood, and we can even get a pretty good stand of dogwood in there to it, but and some elms and some of the hickories as well. But we want to get rid of that what we call that mid-story. That'll increase the sunlight about 30 to 50% of full sun. So it's getting better. If we've got those oak seedlings and oak seedling sprouts, you know, about knee high or less, they'll respond to that. But really, we want to get in there and even remove some of the overstory. We'll call that here in a second, crop tree release, if you will, to where we then get best growth when we're getting 75% plus full sunlight down to the forest floor. So that's, again, a little bit of just light management 101. So here's what a shelterwood might look like. Again, where we really got light coming down. This one here was more where they had done a little prescribed fire in the spring. They were relying here upon their acorn crop. Don't really have a lot of seedling sprouts and things that might be, you know, like knee high or something. But you have the idea. Sometimes, yes, we do small clear cuts. We do them, 5, maybe 10 acres. It might be the only option. You know, it's where foresters aren't timber beasts, but it is a tool in the toolbox that sometimes you just can't do anything with a forest. It's been maybe severely high graded, where past abuse, as far as only taking the best and leaving the rest. It's kind of like if you're a livestock producer, and I ask them, I say, you don't sell off the best of your breeding stock, right? You want to be able to have that for the future generations. Well, in forestry, they come in and they take the tallest and biggest ones, and then what's left behind are the runts to the litter. And so, you know, it really does set up a situation where sometimes you just got to start over. Other ones, though, we have, so those are more even age management, where trees will tend to be within maybe 5, maybe pushing 10 years of one another. So more even age, everything's kind of, developing at the same time. We can do things like group openings, that one across the broader landscape. So this is where we'll go in and maybe take out a patch of trees that'll be about twice the height of the trees. So if you got a trees that are 100-foot tall, maybe a 200-foot patch, and you can have those periodically across the landscape. This one on the lower right, this was actually up in Northwest Missouri. This gentleman had oak wilt, and so he took out the sick and dying trees and created that. He was able to stop the spread of the wilt, but then he also had this nice natural opening for early successional species. Crop tree release, that's one where we go in and so it's just, this is weeding the garden. This is what I like to call weeding the woodland garden. We're wanting to increase the free growing space around our crop tree. And again, a crop tree doesn't necessarily mean a timber tree. It can be whatever you envision a crop tree to be. I've got one landowner over west of Herman in the Missouri River Valley, prime white oak country. She's pretty much harvested all of her white oak in favor of that sugar maple. She's from Vermont, and she likes fall color and sugar maple, maple syrup. So she's done this, and so that's her crop tree. We get some cases though where the nice thing I said earlier on, have your cake and eat it too. You can go in, and if you're increasing the crown of an oak tree for hard mast for deer and turkey, yeah, you're putting on the food factories, increasing those acorns, but it's also increasing the volume of timber in that lumber in that lower bowl of the tree. So again, where we're looking at those trees that are competing with the canopy, the guys underneath, nah, not so much. Those aren't as critical, but we want to make sure that we release at least on two sides. If we just kind of like this picture shows here, if we just release on one side, you really don't do anything. Two sides, you're beginning to move the needle. 3 is better and 4 is best. Sometimes you might have 2 good trees next to one another, so you're only going to release on 3 sides, and that's okay. And this isn't something that, again, the land's going to tell you and your forester what needs to be done. So again, this is what it looks like. So this is where ones were been released on all sides. And we usually, I say about a 10 to 15 foot gap between that. That'll be the time. It'll take another 10 years, maybe less, if on our better sites that are more responsive where the growth can happen, might be less. That might be a good place to kind of put a plug in here. I really didn't say anything about aspect as much, but usually when I work with landowners for timber production or for that sort, we're talking about our north and our east facing slopes. They're cooler, they're moister, the soils are deeper, they're more nutrient rich. You get on the summits and the south and west slopes, you know, your soils are thinner. And so your reentry times that you might do if you are looking to harvest are probably, you know, another 5, maybe 10 years longer than they would be on those others on the north and east slopes. Weeding the garden, different things you might hear, hack and squirt. Yes, chemicals are needed. You could do a double chainsaw girdle, but again, particularly on an oak, like I said, they kind of want to sprout. So if you're wanting stump sprouts, that's one thing if it's a white oak, but if you're really wanting to get rid of that tree, you're probably going to need chemicals. And again, that's where you work with your forester. There are chemicals when they're done the right way. They're just another tool in the toolbox, and they do not, you know, harm the landscape. Large game management practices. I won't hopefully, you know, step on Adam too much, but and he can correct me, but you know, 75% deer turkey diet, those acorns. So again, managing for these folks can really kind of also be managing for your timber production. You've got small game management practices where now if you've got, as probably most landowners, it's not all woods, you've got a mix. And we work with landowners, you know, farmers primarily. They might have their back 40 that they're working with, but you know, whether you have hard edges or soft edges, and I won't say anything more, but whether you're looking for grouse or you're looking for bobwhite quail, so you'll have different management practices that your wildlife biologist and your forester can work with you on. Prescribed fire is a tool in the toolbox too, whether we're talking about keeping some of those seedling sprouts of the species we don't want to have in our woods, like the maples, say, beeches, they're in points east. They're thinner barked, and so they will, you know, a light fire that's done the right way, they can kind of get rid of that competition and favor the oaks if that's what you're wanting to do. And then, of course, you've got also then in your grass areas, and again, managing for small game on your field edges and things of that nature. So prescribed fire is a tool when it's done the right way. And that's the key there is the word prescribed. It's done with a particular prescription when the conditions are right. And there are different firing patterns in there, and you have everything. Chris has done a really super job. I wish we could do what you folks do in Illinois, mimic more over here in Missouri in getting more prescribed fire. We on the landscape. We're doing it. We're getting the prescribed fire council is going, but I really do like the way that we're a little bit looser. I should say our threshold, our training threshold isn't as aggressive and as thorough as what you folks have. You have it in Illinois. I'd feel much better with landowners in Illinois doing prescribed burns than sometimes some of the folks that I work with over here. Good intention folks, but I just feel they got more experience under their belt working with Chris in his shop. Non-game management practices. And again, won't step too much on Adam there, you know, looking at den trees, you know, the sycamores, whatever, you might leave some of these guys and deaden them on the stump, or again, for the different cavity nesters that you have, or the ephemeral ponds. This one's kind of a large ephemeral pond, but they don't have to be that big, just again, taking care of all of the amphibians that are out there that call your woodland home. And again, all this here, the management benefits, all these avian species. I mean, at different stages of the life of the forest, the management that is prescribed can favor not necessarily always at the same time, but again, just showing you that management does have a positive impact on a lot of our birds. So leave it. I'm going to wrap it up. Where do you start, right? I mean, you're going to hear a lot of stuff today, and we're probably going to, overwhelm you. But there's lots of help out there. And I'll start off with my shameless plug right here with Illinois Forestry Extension. The works that you have, the opportunities you have, whether virtual or live, getting timely information from Chris on the Illinois Extension site. Lenny's got a similar one over there in Indiana. We have over here in Missouri, and Adam and Billy up in Iowa. We all have. This is kind of like, it's science-based, it's unbiased. We try to be curators of the best information to put out here, but again, knowing that you're hitting something that is that's unbiased and science-based. And then for you also, the Illinois Forestry Association, that's another good one to look at, just ilforestry.org. Landowners like you, if you're not a member of that, I would strongly suggest getting involved. That's a good way to network. Peer-to-peer learning is probably the best thing. Chris, he's the only one over there. And Lenny's got a few folks. I've got a few folks. But in Missouri, we've got 350,000 landowners that own more than 10 acres. So it can get quite onerous. So it really kind of helps us to have more peer-to-peer learning where we can maybe be more coaches amongst those cohorts that come up. Also, too, the Illinois Division of Forestry. So this webpage has got a lot. So the one, when you call up on it, you'll get, if you haven't been there already, you'll get their main page on the left. And I highlighted that in the red circle there, because that's the one that, like every government agency, we have lots of information out there, and sometimes it's hard to find things, but this is the page that I believe you really want is get to. It's a forestry assistance program for landowners. There's lots of good information out there. It's just like we tend to give a lot, sometimes too much, and it gets overwhelming. That Illinois Forest Action Plan, every state is required by the federal government to have some kind of a plan in place. And we do over here in Missouri as well. So that's another a really good source. This one here, the Illinois Consulting Foresters. So you call this one up, you'll get this page. This, if you scroll down though, you'll actually get a map. You'll see where your consulting foresters. Obviously, most of them are over here in Missouri, or over in Southern Illinois, rather. We get some of our Missouri foresters. They do work over in Illinois. I know some of the folks up in Iowa, they'll cross over Keokuk and get some of the folks over there in the upper Illinois region. So again, you've got another really, really good source of information where you can get help. And really, it's about leaving your legacy. These are just, like I said, every landowner that I deal with has got an interesting story. Dave Murphy there in the top, and his wife Gazella, they're up there in Northeast Missouri, pretty hard scrabble woods. I mean, but he put a plan in place. Dave was one of the conservation commissioners over here and leader of the Missouri Conservation Federation for many years. But hard scrabble woods, you can make that work. Or that's bottom right there. That's Mark Nussbaum. He's that gentleman that owned land in Bolivar County, that one picture I showed you. The cool one I like is the one in the middle. These are the Seagrens. They're down in the south of Rolla, right there, south central Missouri. And they made a field day of planting. They established a walnut plantation. But and now Kristen and Bridget, those are the young ones there. Now they're in college and gone on. But Doug and Lars, the Seagrens, it's been fun to go out and see them. They've really that generation. The best fertilizer is footsteps on the ground, and they've done it. So again, it's all about, again, leaving the place better than you found it and leaving your legacy. I believe that we're at the end. I do appreciate you listening. And here's my contact information. I'll leave it up there for a second, but Chris will have it as well too. And again, you know, Lenny, Chris, myself, Adam, Billy is a forester up there in Iowa, for Iowa State. If there are any of the folks that are outside the bounds, we're here to help.